Today I'm going to start building the doors for the entertainment center that I'm making. And the first step is to rip all of the stiles and rails on the table saw. A lot of my measurements are less than 11 inches, so this is a good time to get rid of any of those short boards that have been hanging around the shop. Well, I finished ripping all of my stiles and rails on the table saw, and now I'm going to cross cut them to length. I'll cross cut the stiles first, and I'm going to make sure to set up a stop block on my workbench. That way I only need to measure once. Now that I've got all of my parts cut to length and width, I'm ready to join them together, and for that I'm going to use the biscuit joiner. I use biscuits and wood glue to join the doors, and then I clamp them for about 2 or 3 hours. And now I'm going to give them a quick sanding with the orbital sander, and I'll use 80 grit sandpaper. I thought I should mention before I start sanding that this project of joining the doors would have been a lot easier using the Craig jig, and the reason why I didn't do that is because I simply don't have one. And they're not very expensive, so I should really just go out and get one, and I'll probably do that before I start my next project. With all the doors sanded, the next step is to cut a mortise for the hinge, and to do that I'm going to use this sled and stack dado blades in the table saw. I want the hinge on every door to start 2 1/4 inches from the bottom of the door and 2 1/4 inches from the top of the door. So I've cut a piece of wood that measures 2 1/4 inches, and I'll put it flush with the bottom of the door and trace a line. And now I'll take the hinge and place it right on that line, and then trace another line. And this is the area that I want to remove. I finished mortising in the hinges, and then I ripped a few pieces of 1/2 inch MDF to become the back of the doors. So you can see I have a door that will be a flat panel, and then I'll put a piece of trim on the inside of that flat panel. So let's make one of the doors, and once I finish that, then we'll make the trim for the inside of the doors. I'm going to lay the door face down with the back facing up, and then apply wood glue. Now I'm going to place the MDF over the door, keeping the MDF flush with the back of the door, and the MDF is a little bit heavy, so I can let it hang over the edge of the door by about 1/8 of an inch all the way around, but I want it flush in the back. I'll use a router with a flush cut bit to remove the overhang. All the doors are almost finished, and the next step is to make trim on the table saw and then trim out the inside of the panel. I'm going to use the 1/2 inch MDF to make that trim, and it's the cutoff material that I'd used for the backs of the doors. I want a very subtle piece of molding, so I'm going to rip a piece of MDF, 1/2 inch MDF to 1 5/8 inches. And then I'm going to tilt the table saw blade at a 7-degree angle, and that'll give me a piece of molding that'll look kind of like that. I finished ripping a 7-degree angle on all of my molding, but if you were to look really close, it's very rough. The saw blade marks are there, and there's a little trick that makes it possible for you to flip the molding and still have a right angle, so you can use the molding on the inside of the door frame. And I'll bring the camera closer and explain. I'm not sure if you can see the difference between the rough side and the good side, so I put a few pencil marks on the rough side to help illustrate my point. Now, if we put the rough side facing up, you can see we have a nice tight seam along the inside of the door, and that's what you want. But the problem with that is the rough side is facing up. But if we were to flip the molding over with the good side facing up, we now have a gap. So this will explain the reason why I originally cut the molding at 1 5/8 inches, because now I'm going to put the rough side down and rip a 1/16 of an inch off of the back and off of the front of the molding, and that will give me a right angle, which will create a tight seam on the inside of my door. With all the molding made, I'm now going to picture frame the inside of all the doors, and I'm going to use wood glue and 3/4 inch long nails and the nail gun. With all the doors trimmed out, the next step is to attach the hinges. I'm using a VIX bit, which is a self-centering drill bit, to pre-drill my holes for the screws. As you can see, I've already hung the door on the right side of the cabinet. Now I'm going to hang the door on the left side of the cabinet. The door is 1/8 of an inch smaller than the opening. So I've taped 4 business cards together, which makes about 1/16 of an inch, and I'm using them for shims. And I'll place the door on those shims and then mark a line where the hinge meets the cabinet. And now I have a mark on the cabinet, and I've only marked at the top of the hinge. I'll square across and then hold the hinge right at that line and flush with the back of the cabinet, flush right here. And again, I'm going to use a VIX bit. And I'll hold the hinge in with 1 screw before I drill the other holes. Now I'm going to remove the hinges from the side of the cabinet. With the holes drilled into the side of the cabinet and a little bit of luck, the door should open and close with a perfect reveal. Okay, good. I'm real happy with the way the door is hung, but there's still one more step, and you can see if I try to open the door, it gets caught up. What I need to do is cut a 5-degree angle off both edges. So this edge here and this edge, and I'm cutting from 0 back at 5 degrees. Well, now the doors are opening and closing really nice. I still have a nice tight reveal in the front of the cabinet, but that 5-degree angle cutback keeps the doors from getting caught up on each other. Now, I've just about finished this project, but there's a lot of little details that I still have to do, and one of them is to remove all of the hinges and then grind them and buff them. And it's one of those things that I think makes a big difference. So that's next time. Thanks for tuning in.